Now we're going to come back to Michigan for our next river, very close to where we're sitting today, and take a trip down what has become one of my favorite rivers and one that Lakeshore Kayak puts people out on. So you could be one of the winners that holds that ticket. It's called Crockery Creek. Crockery Creek is a short 10-mile long river that flows south. And we're going to pick up the last 4 miles of Crockery Creek. We're going to launch just north of I-96 at exit 10, Nunica. And we're going to follow the river past the blue heron nesting area, which I'll talk more about. Exceptional wildlife on this river. And take it all the way down till it empties into the Grand River. The Grand coming from your left and then flowing to your right out to Lake Michigan. Now, Crockery Creek is normally about 5 feet deep, pretty deep river, but we took our trip on May 1. The elevated springtime water levels were 8 to 10 feet deep. This is the true Michigan bayou. There is hanging branches all around you, trees leaning in from each shore. The river at points splits and reconnects again and again. Absolutely wonderful. There is a lot of deadwood that you have to paddle around. Deadwood that requires a bit of paddling ability. It's somewhat of a steering challenge, more of a challenge for some than others. Our buddy here took a detour down Bad Decision River. Rarely is there a good outcome when from a moving boat you grab a stationary branch. And sure enough, 2 seconds after this picture was taken, there was a very loud splash. Fortunately, his daughter Aubrey in the front was dry. Brian, not so much. As you're flowing south on this beautiful little creek, you are flowing along the western edge of 331-acre Crockery Creek Natural Area. That's a breeding ground for sandhill cranes, for eagles, for river otters, for red-headed woodpeckers. And as we were paddling down the river, the mallards and the cranes were all around us, and racing beneath us was steelhead and brown trout. Ahead of us in the distance, in beautiful flashes between the trees, there was a herd of deer. We estimated 30 of them. Incredible noise that their hooves made as they went by. It almost reminded me of a scene from Lonesome Dove with the horses racing across the prairie. And that beautiful scene and the noise were gone almost as soon as they began. And when it was all quiet, we all just looked at each other and went, whew. But the greatest wildlife on Crockery Creek was a little further downstream, 45 minutes into the 2-hour trip. We came upon the blue heron nesting area. We counted 23 nests that were 50 feet above the water line. Big birds, big nest. Here's a close-up. You can see one of the blue herons has left their nest here, and one is still sitting right on the nest. When it's time to lay their eggs, the blue herons find the perfect nesting area, usually 20 feet to 100 feet above the river line. And then the males gather the branches and twigs, and the females weave them into nest. And one of the neat things about that is when they build a nest, they'll use the same nest for years. So this viewing opportunity will be here for a very long time. The blue herons were none too happy that we intruded on their nesting area. Many left the nest and circled and squawked above us. They were about as happy to see us as Mrs. Drysdale was to see the Clampetts move in next door. It was pretty interesting. Another beautiful view from the water of these nests. Just absolutely incredible. 45 minutes into the 2-hour trip. Now, as we got closer to the Grand River, Crockery Creek started widening into this sprawling body of water. It was almost impossible to tell Crockery Creek from the tiny tributaries feeding in. Some of that was because of the elevated water levels. But we soon hit the Grand River, and as you enter into the Grand, if you look straight across the river and slightly to the right, you will see the takeout point. It's the 118th Street DNR access. So you have to paddle across the Grand. It's a quarter-mile wide there. It took us 4 minutes, but well worth it. A wonderful trip. I strongly suggest anybody who has not been on it to experience this beautiful river and the exceptional wildlife. At the end of our day on the Crockery Creek, we said another one of those thank God that we live in Michigan kind of days. One last river to walk you folks down. It's in the southeast part of Michigan. And up until just a couple, 3 years ago, Clinton River was much too clogged with debris to ever think you're going to have an enjoyable time on it. But all that has changed, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Clinton River flows east for 80 miles. It begins in swampland by Pontiac, and then it flows through several cities, Rochester, Auburn Hills, Shelby Township, Utica, and a few others, until it flows into Lake St. Clair just to the east of Mount Clemens. We're going to take on this 80-mile long river a 4.6-mile trip. It's going to take us 90 minutes launching. Let's see if we can beat this one last time. Launching in Shelby Township just south the 22-mile road behind a place called Coyote Joe's and taking out at the brand new canoe landing in the town of Utica. And here we are on our launch, the back deck of Coyote Joe's in the background. This river is shallow. It's 1 to 2 feet deep and on the average about 20 feet wide. One of the neat aspects of it, on this 4.6-mile journey, the first 3.5 miles, there's a beautiful park right alongside on your right called River Bends Park, and some of it on your left. I give a degree of difficulty to every river I write about. Simple 3-step system. Beginner, intermediate, i.e., can you handle a paddle if there's an occasional obstruction, and third, veteran ability required. The level that requires the most experience, this is veteran ability required. It's a very fast current. There's a lot of obstructions that you have to weave around that the current wants to slam you right into. Some of those obstructions are not necessarily made by God. This one, a man-made obstruction. This was a post of what used to be a pedestrian bridge. They just took the bridge out but haven't taken the post out yet. And based on how Al and Peggy are approaching it, I think there could be some problems. Yep, we were right. But keep in mind the river's only 1 to 2 feet deep, so we helped get them upright, and we renamed the post the Al and Peggy post. Now, this is 25 minutes into a 90-minute trip, so once you've gone 20 minutes, every time there's a left bend, be on your toes, because this is coming up fast and the current wants to take you right into the middle of it, and we can always rename this post. So. Now, Al and Peggy were not the only people to flip into the Clinton. We had 35 people out on the water that day. 15 of the 35 went into the drink. But despite that, every one of the 35 said, when can we get back to the Clinton River the next time? I think part of the lure for experienced paddlers, it's fast, there's a lot of tight turns, and there's a great deal of deadwood challenges to paddle around. It's pretty exhilarating going down this river. We don't normally paddle with groups this big. It was our 30th wedding anniversary, so we had a lot of friends in from out of town. Also, this log jam that we posed by, 4 days earlier, that was underwater. The river was 5 feet higher just 4 days earlier. The Clinton River, because there's so many impervious surfaces around both shorelines, is one of Michigan's fastest flooding rivers, easily influenced by heavy rains. Pavement, side streets, sidewalks, none of those are really good at absorbing rainwater, so all that water just goes into the valley and the water levels rise quickly. So if you're thinking of a trip down to Clinton and there's been a recent rain, you'll want to consult first with this couple, Jerry and Renee Reese. They own a place called Clinton River Canoe and Kayak, also known as Outdoor Escorts, one of the many brochures we have on the table there. They can give you the latest conditions, and they're also the ones responsible for changing this river to a river that's so clogged you wouldn't bother with it. They have removed huge debris fields. They've cleared long stretches of the river with winches and ropes and chainsaws, and now they've made it a fabulous paddling destination in southeast Michigan. Part of it's fun to me. You float under a shaded canopy, so on hot days there's a lot of relief, and there's a lot of stone and dirt beaches like this one that offer great opportunities to get out and stretch your legs, or just get out and enjoy the river without the boats for a few minutes. And we're almost at the end of the trip here. When we go underneath this railroad trestle, it tells you you're 15 minutes from the end of the trip, and it also tells you you're about to hit what I technically call Weehaw Rapids. Very, very fun. 15 minutes from the end of the trip. And it was a fast 15. We're now at the end when we see the dock and the canoe landing. Now, in the books, among the other things, I always direct people to an old-time tavern nearby where they can get a good bar burger, a good piece of walleye, whatever. And not knowing the area this well, we were near Rochester, I asked a local resident who would know of such things, and he was Ernie Harwell's old partner behind the mic and a Rochester resident, Paul Carey. And Paul directed us to the Paint Creek Tavern in the town of Rochester. Little Paint Creek floating by there. Don't bother with the rust on that bridge. It is truly a beautiful creek despite that. Just above Paul, you see there's a Pabst Blue Ribbon sign that says Exit 1893. Well, that's the year that they won their blue ribbon at the Chicago World's Fair that told everybody they're the greatest beer in the world. Some of us already knew that. Great burgers, great ham and cheese sandwiches, as these four gentlemen have direct knowledge of. And in this very small little pub, 42 beers on tap. and just a 5-minute walk from where Paint Creek flows into the Clinton River, and there's a beautiful walkway right along Paint Creek. It's really a nice area. Now, I mentioned I might say one thing more about the Tigers. I'm holding a baseball card in my hand. It's a 1960 card of Frank Larry, the great Tiger pitcher. Frank was also known as the Yankee Killer. And on the back of his 1960 card, it will tell you that in the 2 previous years, his record against the Yankees was 13-1. 13-1. Has absolutely nothing to do with canoeing and kayaking, but I love to think about it. Now we're going to end the program as we often do, which is sharing with fellow paddlers what I consider to be Michigan's finest getaway in the entire state. It's called Barothi Lodge. Barothi is, if you go an hour and a half north of Grand Rapids and hit the town of Baldwin, right between Baldwin and Ludington, straight north of the shoreline from where we're at, right in the middle of that, the tiny town of Wahala, that's where you'll find Barothi Lodge. Barothi Lodge is not the name of one cabin, but rather it's 15 rental units on 320 acres of property that sits along a 4-mile stretch of my favorite river, the Pere Marquette River. The 11 biggest of the 15 cabins all have their own fireplace, hot tub, and pool table. The beautiful PM River flowing right behind the Barothi property. Many of the lodges have a fabulous view. They're right on a river bend as the Pere Marquette meanders past them. There's a great deal of wildlife on the grounds. Fire pit, tennis courts, swimming pool, 320 acres of beauty, fabulous hiking trails. If you're looking to combine a special family and friend getaway with a great canoe or kayak trip, and in my book there's none better than the Pere Marquette Barothi Lodge. And I think we're almost out of it. We have a few brochures left, but not too many. Maggie and I have gone every year since '86 for a reason, and it's just a great, great place. This is part of the homepage of our website, canoeingmichiganrivers.com. When I take paddling trips, including Crockery Creek, I do a little write-up, add pictures to give people a little idea of rivers before they get into them. It also has what I think is a very comprehensive list of canoe and kayak liveries throughout the Upper Peninsula and the Lower and Wisconsin. And I have a list of paddling groups that are spread around the state, paddling and environmental groups that have social outings that they invite almost everybody to actually, and cleanup dates that they encourage people to participate in. And even if you're not a member of their groups, they say, come on out, first 1 or 2 times, we'll give you a canoe, you paddle alongside people and learn a lot about some of the great rivers in the state.